Is it still possible to cook a week's worth of healthy dinners for your family on a budget? Well, this week I'm going to the grocery store. I'm getting the ingredients to make 5 nights worth of dinners that are veggie packed, protein packed, and just overall nourishing meals for 4. The tricky part is I'm gonna try to spend just $55 on the ingredients for all of those meals. Yes, $55, which is $2.75 per serving. The first meal that we're gonna be making is a 1-pan garlic and sage chicken thighs dish. For the second meal, it's gonna be a white bean pesto and lemon soup, sauteed beef and lentil lettuce wraps. For the 4th recipe, we're making a pesto pasta and we're also making pesto chicken meatballs. The last recipe of the week is gonna be a roasted cauliflower and lentil bowls. So stick around to see if I was able to actually spend under $55 at the store. Hello and welcome back to my budget grocery series. I'm so excited to be doing another edition. You guys have been asking when the next one is coming. I've been working on it. This is the 10th edition of my budget grocery series. The more editions that I've done, the more out of the box I've had to get. So it's really pushed me to come up with creative recipes and I really love that. So if you're new here, we're shopping on a budget and I'm showing you guys everything that you need. So I give you the grocery list, I give you the recipes, and the great thing about the grocery list, not only is it budget friendly, but you also use up all of the ingredients. So if we use half an onion in one recipe, then we're gonna use the other half in another recipe. We're using up every single thing that we buy. Right off the bat, it's 5 recipes. Each recipe makes 4 servings, so in total you're gonna get 20 servings from the one grocery list. So first, let's talk for a second about how I actually come up with these lists and these recipes, because I wanna share a little bit of behind the scenes and how I actually make it happen. There are a few things specifically that I try to be mindful of that help me stick to budget, but still make these meals that are nourishing and veggie packed and protein packed. The first thing is I just try to make the list mainly consist of items that are kind of like the cheapest things that you might find at the store. If that's proteins, I'm gonna try to go for the less expensive cuts of meat. If it's produce, I'm gonna try to go for things that are in season or those vegetables that are a little bit cheaper on like an everyday basis, like onions, garlic, carrots, celery, broccoli, things like that. I also really try to incorporate like 1 to 2 plant-based recipes every time. Part of that is because I like to, give options and show people who are plant-based that they can follow these lists too. And the other reason is eating plant-based meals can really help you cut down costs, because plant-based proteins tend to be a little bit cheaper than animal protein. So when we're using things like lentils and chickpeas and tofu, it's a great way to bring that grocery budget down. I also focus on things that can be used more than once. Things like rice, coconut milk, broth, lentils, beans, some of those vegetables that can be used multiple times, fresh herbs that can be used multiple times. Anything where we can get a little bit more bang for our buck and then eat it in 2, maybe even 3 different ways is something that I love. Once I have all of those budget-friendly ingredients, I start to build meals based on that. So as I find, one meal that might use half of something, then I'll go back and try to figure out another recipe that will use the other half. Now we'll add more things to the list, and then there'll be things in that recipe that use half. So it is very puzzle-like, and I have a lot of fun putting it together. Now, the other thing about the list is that I always list some basic pantry staples and spices that you're gonna wanna keep on hand while you're following this list. Of course, you might need to restock on some of this stuff, but these are really, really basic things like oils, vinegars, hot sauce, sweeteners, and then the spices you would find likely in your spice cabinet. So for this series, I really want to focus on the fact that we're kind of around the back to school timing. And I know that time of year is a reset for a lot of people, whether you're going back to school or you're not. You want to get organized, you want to get things planned ahead. And it's great to be able to save a little bit of money on the grocery bill after doing all that fun summer stuff and then get ready for the new school year. All of these recipes will be gluten-free and dairy-free, and this one also will be nut-free. So there's going to be really something for everyone, and I will give options for plant-based and non-plant-based. I want to do some of those summer to fall transitional flavors. So things that are comforting and cozy, but also have, fresh vegetables, bright flavors, things like that. Okay, so I'm going to talk way more about all of these meals when I get back from the grocery store, but right now I'm going to head there. I'm going to get all of the ingredients. I'm gonna see what the price is, and then we'll talk through each ingredient, the pantry staples, the spices, and all of the meals that I'm gonna be making during the week. All right, let's go. Reporting to you from the Trader Joe's parking lot. I'm gonna be so honest with you guys. I don't know exactly what the price is gonna be. I think 55 is my sweet spot. I'm gonna go into Trader Joe's, I'm gonna get my groceries, and then I will meet you back at my apartment and we will talk through all of the details. Let's go shopping. I have all of my ingredients, so let's just get right into it. I wanna start with the proteins because those really are the basis of each of the meal and kind of what I crafted around. So let's start with that. I did get ground beef and we're gonna use this for one of the recipes. I got a little over 3 pounds of the bone-in chicken thighs, a pound of ground chicken, and 2 cans of Great Northern beans. So these are the white beans. You could use cannellini beans, you could use navy beans, whatever you like. I also got lentils for a plant-based protein. And then for packaged goods, I got this brown rice and quinoa spaghetti. This also has some protein in it. Chicken broth, coconut milk, basmati rice. And then for all of my produce items, I got some chopped kale, some little gem lettuce leaves, and I'm using these for lettuce wraps, so you can use romaine or butter lettuce, whatever you can find. Some fresh basil, fresh cilantro, again, trying to do as many fresh herbs as I can. Some sage leaves, a big head of cauliflower, a pound of carrots, 3 lemons, a shallot, a bulb of garlic, some green onions, and I almost forgot, nutritional yeast. Those are all of the ingredients that we're gonna use to build these meals. For these 25 different items that are gonna make 5 different meals, what do you think the total was? Let me know in the comments. Okay, total is $54.49. I feel very good about that price. Now I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna turn these ingredients into our 5 meals for the week. I like to give a little bit of a visual, so I have all of the ingredients that we're gonna be using, the pantry staples, the spices, and all of the dinners on this whiteboard. And I'm gonna show you how each ingredient plays into each dish. The first meal that we're gonna be making is a 1-pan garlic and sage chicken thighs dish, and it's gonna have rice, it's gonna be creamy from coconut milk and broth. I do a lot of dishes like this, so if you've been following along for a while, it's gonna be familiar to you, but the sage kind of like early fall vibe is really gonna be coming through on that one. So we'll be using the rice, the broth, the coconut milk, the nutritional yeast. We're gonna use some of the shallot, we're gonna use some of the garlic, some of the kale, and obviously we're gonna be using that fresh sage. Now for the second meal, it's gonna be a white bean pesto and lemon soup. I'm pumped about this one. What we're gonna do is make a pesto at the beginning of the week, and that's gonna have 2 uses. So first it's gonna go in the soup. We're gonna use the white beans. We're gonna use the rest of our broth. We're gonna use the rest of our coconut milk. We're also gonna use the nutritional yeast. We'll have rice in the soup. We're gonna have the other half of the shallot and more of the garlic. We're gonna use the lemons. Okay, third dinner, sauteed beef and lentil lettuce wraps. So the ground beef and the lentils, of course, are the main components of that. We're gonna use the little gem lettuce as the actual lettuce wraps. We're gonna use some of the carrots in there. We'll use the green onion and the cilantro. We're also gonna use some of the tahini to make a little tahini sauce. It's gonna be a little bit spicy and creamy, and then it's gonna be drizzled on top. That's gonna be really good, I think. For the fourth recipe, we're gonna be using the pesto again. We're making a pesto pasta, and we're also making pesto chicken meatballs. They're gonna have the pesto directly in them, and of course using up more of that basil, our pasta, and more of the lemon. The last recipe of the week is gonna be a roasted cauliflower and lentil bowls, and I'm picturing cauliflower florets and lentils that get crisped up really nicely with some of these beautiful spices, and we're gonna do kale and rice on the bottom, and we're gonna make another type of tahini sauce using the tahini. It's gonna have fresh herbs, and it's gonna be kind of like a green goddess tahini sauce. I know I sometimes have people who are hesitant to do the plant-based recipes, but I think this one's gonna be a winner. The last 2 things I wanna talk about are substitutions and early prep options. There are a lot of substitution options, so if the option that I give you isn't your vibe, leave me a comment. I will get back to you on what I think might be a better sub. So first, for that 1-pan chicken and rice dish, my preference for a plant-based option would probably be chickpeas. I would actually cook the chickpeas in the oven with the same spices that go on the chicken, roast them with a little bit of oil until they get nice and crispy. Once the rice is done cooking, then add the chickpeas on top, which I think sounds absolutely delicious, and it's making me want to try it that way, honestly. The white bean pesto and lemon soup is already plant-based. If you wanted that to not be plant-based, because I know some people do really like to add the animal proteins in, you could definitely add shredded cooked chicken breast to the soup. Another option that would be really good in that soup is adding in some spicy or sweet Italian sausage. And then for the sauteed beef and lentil lettuce wraps, you can just use lentils, double the amount that that I'm gonna give. And then on the other end, you could do all beef, no lentils. For the pesto pasta with the chicken meatballs, my suggestion for a plant-based sub for the meatballs would either be to get a plant-based meatball that you can just like buy in the store and then kind of like toss them in the pesto instead of the pesto being inside. Or what you could do is you could sub it for a block of tofu, cut it up into cubes after pressing it for a little bit, toss it with a little bit, I like to do like tapioca starch, a little bit of garlic powder, tiny bit of salt, toss it together, bake it, and then once the tofu is all crispy, it should be about 20 or 25 minutes, then toss it in the pesto and add it to your pasta. You could also do plant-based crumbles and then mix that into the pesto pasta. I think that would be really good. And then for the last recipe, the roasted cauliflower and lentil bowls, those are already plant-based. If you wanted an option to add meat, my suggestion would be a little bit of baked salmon on top, I think would be delicious. Chicken, of course, would be really good on that. I don't think you can really go wrong with this bowl because the spices are gonna be such a big part of it, and then that sauce. So whatever protein you like, honestly, you could put on there, but I don't recommend skipping the cauliflower. I think the cauliflower is gonna be really, really good in this one. If you have any other substitution questions, just let me know in the comments. I know coconut milk is a big one for people, so I usually suggest light cream as a sub for coconut milk. And of course, I do make these gluten-free, but if you aren't gluten-free and you don't wanna use gluten-free pasta, just use regular pasta. You'll save a little bit of money too. If you don't wanna use bone-in chicken thighs, you can use boneless chicken thighs. Make sure you fully cook them until they're at an internal temp of 165. That's everything I can really think of, so just let me know if you need any other sub. And now let's talk about prep. There's not that many things that even need to be prepped ahead of time for these recipes, but what you could do is we're gonna dice up this shallot. You really wanna almost mince it and make the pieces really, really small. So you could do that ahead of time and store in an airtight container in the fridge if you wanted to. Same with the garlic, but these are things that are really quick to do in the moment, so I don't feel like you have to do that. A lot of the other vegetables are things we're just kind of gonna use as is. Exceptions would be the cauliflower. We're gonna cut this into small florets. You could do that ahead of time if you wanted to, or you could buy them as florets already. For the carrots, we're gonna use the bulk of them by cutting into about 1-inch pieces. So that's gonna be like 3 to 4 carrots, depending on how many you have in here. For the other like 2 to 3 carrots left, we're gonna cut them almost matchstick, so very thinly. You could do that ahead of time if you wanted to. I try to make these meals easy to like just toss together for a weeknight dinner, so there's not gonna be very long cook times or prep time, but those are the veggies that you could do ahead of time. All right, that's everything. I'm gonna get my groceries put away, and then I will see you tomorrow for recipe number 1. This is recipe number 1, and we're making a 1-pan garlic and sage chicken thighs and rice. It's gonna be so good. But let's start today by going over the ingredients that are gonna be in today's recipe. The star of the dish is gonna be the chicken thighs. I got bone-in, skin-on chicken thighs. We're gonna cook it in the rice, and it's just gonna all come together so beautifully. We're also using some Basmati rice. You can use Jasmine rice. You could even use brown rice if you wanted to. You'll just need to cook things for a little bit longer. Chopped kale, some fresh sage leaves, and we're also gonna be using ground sage. We're gonna use half of our shallot. We're gonna use a couple cloves of our garlic. For liquid, we're gonna use chicken broth or veggie broth and coconut milk. And we're also gonna be using nutritional yeast. This just gives a little bit of a cheesy flavor. You could also use Parmesan cheese if you don't like nutritional yeast or you're scared of it, but I promise it's not scary. It tastes really good. And then for our pantry staples, very basic, just olive oil. And then we have our spices, which will include salt, pepper, ground sage, smoked paprika, and thyme. Okay, let's get to cooking. I have just over 3 pounds of bone-in chicken thighs here, and the first step of the recipe is gonna be to pat these dry with a paper towel, and then we're gonna cover all over with those spices that we have and sear on the pan. So let's start with that. The drier that these get, the crispier the skin is going to get when we sear them. Now we're gonna make a simple spice mix: dried thyme, kosher salt, smoked paprika, ground sage, and black pepper. Now I'm gonna sprinkle this on top. I wanna do slightly more than half to go on this skin side, and then I'm gonna flip them over and do the rest. If you need to supplement a little bit, you can add just a little bit more of all those spices if you didn't have enough to coat. Depends on how many thighs you have. Okay, so this is what they should look like. We just have a little bit of veggie prep to do, and then we'll get started searing the chicken. Now we just have very, very simple veggie prep to do for this recipe. We're gonna dice the shallot. We're gonna mince our garlic cloves. We're gonna use about 3 for this recipe. And then I'm going to finely chop enough of the sage to make a tablespoon. And then I'm gonna leave the rest of the pieces whole. I'm just like smelling the sage right now, and it smells so good. It smells like Thanksgiving. So I'm gonna separate half of these shallots and put them in an airtight container because we're gonna use them in tomorrow's recipe. Next, we're gonna chop up 3 cloves of garlic. You could swap to garlic powder if you wanted to, but I like using the real thing when I can. All right, and then last thing are these sage leaves. If you didn't want to get the sage leaves, you could also just do the ground sage. I'm happy to have it in here. So I'm leaving the rest of the sage leaves whole, and now it's time to heat up the skillet and get this 1-pan meal going. Okay, so I'm heating this pan over medium heat. This is about the smallest size that I would go for your skillet. You want something that has a lid, you want something that's deep and has these sides. It's gonna be a good amount of food, so don't go any smaller than something like this. And if you wanted to use a Dutch oven, you could, but something wider is better so then all the chicken can rest on top. Now that this pan is hot, I'm adding 2 tablespoons of olive oil, basically just enough to kind of coat the bottom. And once this is heated and shimmering a little bit, I'm gonna add the chicken. You wanna make sure the oil is hot before you add the chicken because that's gonna result in that crispy skin. Now that it's hot, I am gonna add in the chicken thighs. Now you wanna go skin side down first. That's the noise we're looking for. And now we're just gonna let this cook for about 5 minutes until the skin is crispy. Ooh yeah, exactly what we're looking for. Now we're gonna do another few minutes on this side. Now that we have these chicken thighs crisped on both sides, we are gonna remove them and set them aside for a few minutes. Right away in these oils, we're adding the shallot. And you're gonna wanna stir pretty much constantly because this oil is hot and you don't wanna burn it. Just wanna get an initial cook on these shallots. Okay, and that was about 30 seconds. Now we're adding the garlic and the chopped sage. Keep stirring. The smell of this is unbelievable. And this also helps with getting all those crispy bits off of the pan. Those just have a ton of flavor in it from cooking the chicken. Those were sauteed for about a minute. And next I'm going in with our rice. This is 1 cup of rinsed rice. And you wanna immediately incorporate it. So we want the rice to toast right on the pan. I have made quite a few 1-pot rice and chicken dishes. There's so many on my website. I'm just letting this toast for about a minute. Next we have our nutritional yeast, 2 tablespoons. This is gonna give a little bit of a cheesy flavor. And I'm also just gonna season with a generous sprinkle of salt. I just want that rice to be seasoned. Let's mix. And the rice is getting nice and toasty. It's like, feels crunchy. Now I'm adding the kale. We're doing 2 cups. Gotta get our veggies in there. And then right away with our liquids. So it's gonna be 1.5 cups of chicken broth, 3/4 of a cup of coconut milk, and 1/2 cup of water. You just want all of this stuff to be covered by a decent amount of liquid. So if you need to add more water, even after it's cooked halfway, you can absolutely do that. We want it to be saucy, but not swimming in liquid. So I'm just giving this a good stir. And now I'm adding back the chicken thighs directly on top. Now, right away, this is gonna go into the oven at 375 degrees until the rice is nice and cooked and fluffy, which should be about 14 to 16 minutes. Now, this is completely optional, but because I like to use up every single thing that we buy, what I'm gonna do is take the extra sage leaves and put them on the skillet with a little bit of heated oil and make some crispy sage leaves, and then that's gonna go on top when the chicken and the rice comes out. Not at all necessary, and obviously that takes away from the 1-pot aspect, but crispy sage is just delicious, and I figured it would be a good way to reduce my waste. So this is just a couple tablespoons of oil. It will depend on the size of the pot or pan that you're using. They crisp up pretty quickly. We'll just do a couple of minutes. And I'm just flipping these. And you want them to get nice and crispy, just like this. Okay, I think we're just about done. I'm gonna check this. And you just wanna keep cooking until that rice is fully cooked. It'll be crispy on top, but you wanna see kind of underneath, is it cooked and is it fluffy? It's looking really good. Okay, this is looking So stunning. I love when the rice around the edges gets really, really nice and crispy. And because we baked it instead of putting the cover on, we let the chicken get nice and crispy, or I guess stay nice and crispy on top. I'm just gonna add now the crispy sage. It looks so pretty. It looks like fall. Okay, taste test. Oh my gosh, it's so perfect, so early fall. And I love that there's veggies in here, but it's still a very like cozy, comforting dish. I need to take another bite. As much as I love the chicken, the rice is definitely my favorite part. It's so delicious though. You're getting all these different textures, so every bite is unique and exciting. The crispy sage leaves, so good. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow. This is the second recipe of the week. It's gonna be a lemony, creamy, really cozy and delicious soup recipe. So let's quickly go through all of the ingredients, what the recipe is gonna be, and how I'm kind of envisioning it coming to life. So today we are making a pesto, lemon, and white bean soup. And these are all the ingredients that we're gonna use for the soup. We're gonna be finishing off the broth that we used yesterday, and we're also gonna be finishing off the remainder of coconut milk. I always use up all of the ingredients that we bought, so if we used half of something, we're gonna be using it in another recipe. So just take note of that if you're following along. If something is left over, there is a reason for it, and we're going to use it. In the soup, we're gonna have a pesto, of course. I'm gonna make the pesto, and it's gonna be a simple nut-free pesto. Obviously, basil is gonna be the key component of that. We're gonna use a little bit of lemon, a little bit of garlic. I'm gonna use our nutritional yeast for that cheesy flavor. And I'm gonna put a little bit of kale in the pesto as well to make it a kale pesto. And then olive oil, salt, and pepper. For the protein for the soup, it's gonna be 2 cans of the white beans. I got Great Northern beans. So you can use this type of bean. This is what they have at Trader Joe's where I shopped. You can use navy beans, you can use cannellini beans, whatever you can find. It's gonna taste very similar. We're also gonna be using up the rest of the shallot from yesterday in today's soup, a few more cloves of the garlic, and then we're also gonna be using a little bit more of our rice. So it is kind of a basic recipe. There's not a crazy amount of ingredients, especially once the pesto is done. And if you wanted to use your own pesto and not make it from scratch, especially if you're following this recipe not as part of the full grocery list, you can absolutely do that. One thing to note is we're not using all of the pesto today. We're gonna be using some of the pesto in another recipe this week. So read the recipe, use the amount that I specify, and then leave the rest aside. So first thing is to make the pesto, and there's not really any veggie prep that we need to do. I cut up the shallot yesterday, so that's already done. It's really just mincing the garlic cloves. So let's go and make the pesto. Okay, for the pesto, I wanted to make a nut-free pesto because I know some of you are nut-free. I honestly don't think we need it because we want a thinner pesto for the recipes that it's going into. It'll be a very simple pesto aside from adding in kale. We're taking out nuts, and instead of Parmesan cheese, to keep it dairy-free, we're using nutritional yeast. I measured out 1.5 cups of basil leaves from the basil that we got. Tightly pack your cups when you're measuring it. We want that very basil-y taste. So I'm gonna add this to my food processor. You can do this in a blender too. Then I measured out shredded kale, so I'm gonna add that in. And then push down. Now I've got just 1 clove of garlic, and I wanna push that down kind of to the bottom so it blends up. And then I'm gonna do 1/4 cup of nutritional yeast. I like nutritional yeast in general, but I especially like it in my pesto. I just think it gives it a really nice, like nutty flavor, especially when we're not using nuts. Now we're gonna do juice of half of the lemon that I just zested, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and a 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper. So we're gonna first blend this up, and then we're gonna stream in olive oil. If you're using a blender, blend first, then add your oil and blend again. Okay, so I have it on chop, and I'm just gonna blend it up until there are no large pieces. Just gonna scrape the sides once. Blend it again. And now I'm just gonna measure out a 1/2 cup of olive oil. This is gonna make for a pesto that's relatively thin. So I'm gonna start blending, and then I'm gonna stream in the oil as it blends. Smells amazing. Okay, I'm just scraping the sides again, and I just wanna taste it, see if I need to add any more salt. Yum. I think I'll add a little bit of salt, pinch. I love how lemony it is. By the way, if you're looking for any of my kitchen tools, like my food processor, I always link everything that I use in the description. All right, looks good. Now that we have our pesto done, let's get started on the soup. Okay, soup time. So I've got a large pot here and I just turned the heat to medium. Now I'm adding 2 tablespoons of olive oil to the pot. Okay, oil is shimmering. I'm gonna add in the chopped shallot. And this is 1/2 of a shallot. Just stir into the oil and I'm gonna let this saute just for a short time until the shallots are a little bit translucent. So the shallot has been cooking for just about maybe 1.5 minutes, and it's looking a little bit translucent now. I'm adding in 3 minced garlic cloves, and you just don't want the garlic to burn, so you gotta be careful at this stage. Now I'm gonna do salt, black pepper, oregano, and a little bit of red pepper flakes. This is optional. So aromatic. I'm adding a little bit of nutritional yeast. Started at 1 tablespoon. You can swap that for parm if you want, but maybe wait till we have the other ingredients in because you don't want to get it too melty and crispy if you're doing parm. Okay, next up, I rinsed a cup of rice and I'm gonna add this right into toast. I always like to toast the rice before I add liquid. It just adds that flavor without you really needing to do anything extra. Now I'm gonna use the rest of our chicken broth from yesterday. It's about 2.5 cups left in here. We're gonna pour that in. Then we have the rest of our coconut milk, and this is 3/4 of a cup, half a can. And it's okay if there's hardened pieces in the coconut milk, those will just melt away. And then I'm gonna do water, starting with 2 cups, and I'm gonna see how it is once the rice is cooked. So give this a good stir. And now I'm gonna put the lid on. We're gonna bring this to a boil, reduce the heat a little bit, and let it cook for 10 minutes. My rice is just about fully cooked, looking good. And now I'm gonna add in the 2 cans of white beans, 3 cups of our shredded kale, and 1/3 cup fresh basil. Mix to combine. The rice did soak up a good amount of the liquid, so I'm gonna add a little more in. About 1.5 cups. I'm gonna put the lid on and cook to let the beans soften a little bit. Okay, it's been about 3 minutes. And stir, looking good. Let's add the pesto. This is a 1/4 cup. Juice of half a lemon, the lemon zest. I'm gonna need to salt this a little bit more too, since I added a decent amount of water. And just a lot of volume, so it needs a good amount, and I did reduce sodium broth. The salt is definitely what it needed. So good, I think we're ready to serve. I'm just gonna let it simmer on low for a couple of minutes, just while I prepare the dishes. Okay, the soup looks absolutely beautiful. I love how it's a little bit creamy, but it's also brothy, it's cozy, it has the rice. So just like the perfect combo. I'm gonna top it off with a little bit of leftover lemon zest that I had, and just a little pinch of red pepper flakes. If you wanted to make this a spicier soup, I think adding spicy sausage would be really good. Okay, it's time for the best part of the video, which is, of course, the taste test. Smells so good. Delicious smelling, and let's see if it's delicious tasting. It is indeed delicious tasting. So bright, but still cozy, which is why I said it was kind of a good transitional recipe between summer and fall. Like, it's giving me the cozy taste that I'm kind of thinking about going into early fall, but it still has the basil and the lemon and those like bright summery flavors that we think of. So I love the combination of the two. I would say my biggest tips for this one are make sure you salt to taste, because we add in a lot of water, and unless you wanted to supplement that with like your own broth, you need to salt to make up for that. I ended up adding a decent amount of salt. I like the red pepper flakes addition if you like a little bit of spice. I think it really adds something there. It's a simple soup, but it's cozy, it's yummy, and not to mention it comes together really quickly. That was not a lot of cooking time. I would definitely call this a successful recipe number 2. I love that we used up so much stuff from yesterday's recipe. We used up the shallot, we used more of the garlic, we used more of the rice and more of the kale. We used up the rest of the coconut milk and the broth. Like, those 2 recipes really complemented each other in terms of reducing waste. So that always makes me really happy. It also made a really decent serving. Like, there's a lot of soup in here. So I'm excited to be able to freeze some of this, but I can't wait for you to try it. Thank you so much for watching. I will catch you back here tomorrow for recipe number 3, and I'm just so looking forward to it. Now this is day 3 of the series. Today's recipe is gonna be a sauteed beef and lentil lettuce wrap. The wraps are gonna have a Sriracha tahini sauce that you can drizzle on top. We're gonna put cilantro on top and green onion and carrots. It's gonna be veggie packed and protein packed. So let's dig in, let's go through all of the ingredients that we're gonna use and then start cooking. Okay, ingredients for today. Our key proteins are gonna be lentils, which is not an ingredient I use a ton, but it's really budget friendly. It's really delicious. I like lentils. I just don't think about them that much. And ground beef. I'm using these little gem lettuce leaves as lettuce wraps. You can use these, especially if you're shopping at Trader Joe's. You can use romaine, you can use butter lettuce leaves, whatever works for you. And if you didn't want to do a lettuce wrap, we could make these into tacos, or you can make them as bowls. We're gonna have a little bit of extra rice, so you can make some rice bowls and add everything on top. I just like to switch things up, and we've done some of that already, so we're doing lettuce wraps for this one. In the beef and lentil mixture, there's gonna be a couple of components that make up a really delicious sweet and spicy sauce. So Sriracha is gonna be one of those components. If you don't like spicy, you can leave it out, and that's totally fine. Coconut aminos, which is just a replacement for soy sauce, so you can use soy sauce or tamari. Maple syrup to make the sauce a little bit sweet. Toasted sesame oil, olive oil, and some spices as well. We're gonna do smoked paprika, kosher salt, ground ginger, garlic powder, red pepper flakes, and sesame seeds, which are both optional. We're gonna make a sauce out of these 2 ingredients. It's just gonna be a little bit more Sriracha and tahini. You could sub your tahini for almond butter or cashew butter, even sunflower butter I think would work, but I'm going with tahini. Keep it nut-free, and I just really love the taste of tahini. And then finally, going on top of the lettuce wraps, we're gonna do some cilantro, some carrots that we'll cut up, and some green onions that we'll slice. So the first thing that I'm gonna do to kick off the recipe is I'm gonna start cooking the lentils, and then there's just a little bit of veggie prep that we have to do. So let's go do that and get started. First, I'm gonna finely chop about half of my cilantro, and this is gonna be for topping at the end, but I just wanna get all my veggie prep done and out of the way. And I'm really just trying to get the leaves here. Don't need the stems. I love the smell of cilantro. Also, if you're somebody that doesn't like cilantro, you can absolutely leave it out. Next, I'm doing my green onion. We basically are just using half of the bag. I'm doing 2 because these are really big. So you just want to thinly slice these. Then I'm just gonna peel 2 decently large carrots and thinly slice them. These are all for toppings. So you could either do ribbons here or kind of like matchstick thin slices. It's really up to your preference. I'm gonna do kind of like thin sticks. So I'm just cooking the lentils according to package instructions, which is a ½ cup of lentils to 1½ cups of water. Let's quickly make the tahini sauce, and then we'll have everything ready so that we can start sauteing. Starting with a ¼ cup of tahini. Tahini is just ground sesame seeds. Now I'm gonna start with a teaspoon of Sriracha. I'm gonna do a little pinch of salt. I also have some warm water reserved so we can thin this out. Okay, so now that we have our sauce done, the lentils just finished. And this is just a ½ cup of lentils. Let me give you a close up, but it really makes a lot once it's cooked. So now it's time to start sauteing our ground beef. So I've got a decently large skillet here, and I'm gonna bring this to medium heat. And now that it's heated, I'm adding in just about a tablespoon of olive oil. And now that the oil is hot, I'm adding in the pound of ground beef. I'm just cooking this while kind of breaking it up into little pieces until it's browned all over. It's gonna be about 5 to 7 minutes. All right, it's just about browned all over. Now I'm gonna mix up my spices. I have salt, garlic powder, ground ginger, a little bit of smoked paprika, and red pepper flakes in here. Just mix everything. Now I'm continuing to let this cook. I'm adding in a 1/3 cup of coconut aminos, 1 tablespoon of sesame oil, 1 tablespoon of maple, and 1 tablespoon of our Sriracha. And I just want the sauce to cook down for a couple of minutes. It's been about 3 minutes, and the sauce has cooked down a good amount. Now I'm just gonna clear the center and mix in my lentils. I just want the flavors to really get into the lentils, so I'm gonna continue cooking for just a few more minutes. Okay, now that most of the liquid has been absorbed from the sauce in the beef mixture, and it feels like the flavors have really had a chance to combine, it's time to plate our lettuce wraps. And take a look, it looks really, really good. While my sauce was sitting, it thickened up a little bit, so I did just add 1 more tablespoon of warm water to bring it back to a little more liquidy state. I washed the lettuce leaves after I separated them. You'll definitely have extra to do as many as you want. Let's add the beef mixture. I'm gonna start with the carrots. Now a little bit of our green onion, cilantro, and then our tahini sauce. I'm just gonna do a little drizzle on each one. I don't want it to be too overpowering because it did give a good amount of spice. Okay, I just topped it off with our sesame seeds, and that's it for the lettuce wraps. They look really, really delicious. I think doing the sauce as an extra step really did make a difference. It adds to the look of it, and I think it's gonna add a lot, of course, to the flavor of it. It's gonna give a little bit of nutty and spicy to go on top of these other flavors, and I'm just really excited to take a bite. I also wanted to note really quickly that I made a sauce that's very similar with tahini and a teaspoon of smoked paprika instead of sriracha, just to try a different option. And this one is kind of like a smoky sauce. So if you want smoky over spicy, just do the same ratio, but 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika. Okay, I'm so excited to taste, so let's just do the taste test. Wow. Honestly, they are like 10 times better than I expected them to be. It might be my favorite that we've made so far. The flavor of the sauce is just so good. I always kind of go back to this with coconut aminos, sriracha, and maple syrup. It just always makes for the most delicious combo. And the different textures that you get from the ground beef and the lentils and the herbs on top, the carrots giving that crunch, and then the actual lettuce wraps giving a crunch too. Just like the perfect combo of everything. If you're not somebody that usually cooks with lentils, and I'm kind of not, I use them sometimes, but definitely not as much as I use something like ground beef. I highly recommend you try this recipe because it's fun to incorporate something in a way where it's almost hidden and you do get the benefit of the texture of the lentils, but I don't know if you would notice right away that they're in there. And you're adding in even more protein. Like sometimes I'll add frozen cauliflower rice to my ground beef mixture just to get a veggie in, but I think I'm gonna start doing this instead because not only are you adding another plant in there, but you're getting the added protein, you're getting more of a substantial texture. It's just adding like so much more than I really expected when I first wrote out the recipe. Well, I'm feeling very happy with today's recipe. This one is just like a standout for me so far. Okay, I'll see you back here tomorrow. This is the 4th recipe of the week. Today we're gonna be making a very simple weeknight dinner. It's gonna be a pesto chicken meatball recipe, and we're gonna pair it with some pesto pasta, and it's just gonna be bright and a little bit summery, but still cozy, just like all of the other recipes. Again, very, very simple. So I'm looking forward to kind of just like curling up on the couch and eating this one after I'm done making it. Before we get into making the recipe today, let's just touch on what all the ingredients are gonna be and what the components of the dish will be. Okay, so all of the ingredients that are gonna go in today's kale pesto pasta with pesto chicken meatballs. Firstly, our pesto that we made. This was from the white bean, lemon, and pesto soup that we made the other day. So if you're following along and you reserved your pesto, then that's what you're gonna use. You could also use store-bought pesto, or you can make the pesto today. If you didn't make it the other day, I have the ingredients and the full recipe linked for you in the description. So the pesto is a key component. We have about 3/4 of a cup left. And then the other ingredients are spaghetti. I'm using brown rice and quinoa spaghetti from Trader Joe's, keeping all the recipes gluten and dairy free, or if you're not gluten free, regular spaghetti is totally fine. But I do like how this one has a little bit of protein in it. Also going into the pasta is some nutritional yeast, which is also in the pesto. This just adds a little bit of cheesy flavor. And if you don't want to use it, you can swap it for grated parmesan. We're gonna use some more lemon. I have a pound of ground chicken. You could use ground turkey as well, but I think the ground chicken is gonna be really good for this. We have some fresh basil leaves left over from making the pesto and the soup that I'm gonna mix into the pasta. And then as far as staples, very simple. We're gonna use olive oil, salt, black pepper, garlic powder, and dried oregano. Like I said, not a lot of ingredients. And the first step is gonna be to make our chicken meatballs. There's really no veggie prep that we have to do, which I always love. So I'm gonna start tossing those together and I'll talk through everything that goes in. Okay, meatball prep. So while we're doing this, I just put a pot of water on to boil. That's gonna be for our pasta. And I preheated the oven to 400 and lined a small-ish, maybe medium-sized sheet pan with parchment paper. So let's put all of our meatball ingredients in the mixing bowl. First, it's gonna be 1 pound of ground chicken. Now we're gonna do a 1/4 cup of the pesto that we prepped. Reserve the rest of the pesto. We're gonna use the rest in the pasta. Now I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast, a teaspoon of salt, teaspoon of garlic powder, teaspoon of dried oregano. I'm gonna do about a 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper. And last thing, I'm adding the zest of 1/2 of a lemon. Now people normally ask me when I make meatballs, like It doesn't need egg to bind it together because usually in a meatball recipe, you find egg in there. I have been making meatballs like this for a long time now, and as long as you have some of these other components, like in here, we obviously have the pesto, which is gonna help bind it together. I never have any issues with it. As long as you form them into nice little balls before you put it in the oven, you're not gonna have an issue. And now I'm just gonna mix it all up until it's a uniform mixture. I love how adding the pesto is making it so that there's almost little like speckles of green throughout. Okay, and now that it's looking like a pretty uniform mixture, it's time to roll into balls. I'm gonna scoop the meatball mix using this little cookie scoop. You can use a different size if you want to. I like to make them kind of small. This is about 2 tablespoons, and that's gonna make it so they cook really quickly. If you wanna make a bigger meatball, you totally can. Just adjust the cook time as needed. And I like using the cookie scoop because I know that they're all gonna be the same size. So that made me about 18 meatballs, and now I'm just adding a little bit of oil to my hands and I'm gonna shape them into balls. Now these are ready for the oven. These will cook very quickly, so I'm gonna start them at just like 12 minutes. And my water just started boiling, which is perfect timing. I think this is gonna time up very nicely. So I'm adding in my spaghetti. Just don't want those to stick together. I just drained my pasta, so I'm just adding it back to the pot. I reserved 1 cup of pasta water. That's very important, make sure you do that. And the heat is off. I have the pasta back in the pot, and now I'm adding the rest of our pesto. The remaining pesto is about a 1/2 cup, so you can add all of it in there. And then I'm starting with half of the reserved pasta water. Now let's mix this to just cover the pasta in kind of like a coat of pesto. Just like a light coating. This is not a heavily sauced pasta. I kind of wanted it to feel summery in that way, but I'm gonna add lemon juice. I'm also adding in the rest of our basil. It's a cup of basil leaves. Now we've used all of the basil that we got. And you just wanna mix that in to wilt. You could also finely chop the basil. I just kind of kept them as whole leaves because most of the pieces were really small anyways. Okay, and the meatballs are just about done. So I'm gonna keep this off the heat and grab those out of the oven. I love that they're green. They're so pretty. Okay, very simple pasta is done, and our meatballs are also done. They look really great. Even the oil coming off of them is green from the pesto, and I love how green this meal is. I do want to try one of the meatballs just to see how they came out, so I'm gonna steal a bite. They are delicious. They have just the right amount of pesto in there, in my opinion. It just gives that little bit of pesto taste, but not overpowering because we're gonna have the pesto in the pasta as well. I'm really excited to have a bite of everything at once, so let's get it plated up. Okay, time for the best part, time to taste it. And I know I already tasted the meatballs, but I'm looking forward to this entire plate. I love making a meal that's really not a lot of work, but still incorporates those same kind of principles that I like to include in all my recipes. Like, it still has veggies in here, but they're in a different form than usual. I've made the pesto, but there's a lot of basil in there, which is nutrient packed. And I think people forget about that. And also in season still, which is great. And I love how it's a little bit cozy, but it has the flavors of summer. You have the lemon, you have the pesto, but it's still kind of like a warm, cozy pasta dish. I just like the contrast of those two things, and I think this dish is gonna be perfect for a busy weeknight. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking, let's just dig right in. It's so simple, but it's also so good. It's so comforting, it's delicious, it's flavor packed, and it's just the kind of food that I actually want to eat. Something at the end of a long day I'm actually gonna be looking forward to digging into, and honestly looking forward to making because it is so easy. I have a feeling like this one is gonna end up on my monthly, at least, dinner rotation. Thank you so much for watching. I'm gonna be back tomorrow with the last recipe for this week. I will see you then. It's the last day of this week's series. The last recipe is always the most satisfying. Everything that's on the counter here is everything that was left on the list that I picked up. For today's recipe, we're gonna be doing one more plant-based recipe, and it's gonna be a roasted cauliflower and lentil grain bowl. It's gonna have a green tahini sauce, it's gonna have crispy lentils, it's gonna have roasted cauliflower, and it's also just gonna have a lot of veggies in there. To start, let's just go over all of the ingredients in the bowls. The first ingredient is gonna be 1 whole head of cauliflower that we're gonna cut up into florets. In order to get our protein, we're also gonna do lentils, and I'm gonna roast these two together so that the lentils get nice and crispy and golden. I'm also gonna throw some carrots on the sheet pan, so just like another veggie to put in there. I think it's just gonna be so delicious. And also giving us a little bit of protein, we're gonna make that tahini sauce, and it's gonna have tahini, it's gonna have cilantro in it, and it's gonna have green onion, a little bit of lemon, kind of like a green goddess type dressing, but with tahini. Everything is gonna be on top of a bowl of rice mixed with all the leftover kale that we have. And then we're gonna top it off with cilantro and green onions. So those are all of the ingredients. And then as far as spices, we're gonna be using red pepper flakes, we're gonna use smoked paprika, garlic powder, dried oregano, salt, black pepper, and then some olive oil. So first what we're gonna do is cook our lentils, and then while the lentils are cooking, I'm gonna take this big head of cauliflower and I'm gonna chop it into small florets so that they're ready to be roasted. I'm also gonna cut up the carrots, and then after we do that, we'll toss everything on the sheet pan and make our tahini sauce. So essentially in the end, we're gonna have 3 main components. It's gonna be that sheet pan, it's gonna be the rice that I'm gonna mix with kale, and then it's gonna be the green tahini sauce. At the end, everything will come together. We'll top it off with the sauce and we'll try it together. Okay, so I am just cooking these lentils according to the package instructions. So it's 3 cups of water and 1 cup of lentils. Okay, lentils are in. I just washed my cauliflower. Let's get this cut into florets. Okay, so all of the pieces I would say are no bigger than 1.5 inches. I'm just gonna transfer the cauliflower into here. Now I just peeled the rest of the carrots that I have. I used like 2 to 3 so far, and then the rest, I have a good amount, but they're small. So you could do like 4 large carrots, or I have like 7 or 8 kind of smaller carrots here. And while I do this, I'm gonna preheat the oven to 400. My lentils are still cooking. So I wanna cut these into, I would say like 1.5 inch pieces, very similar to the cauliflower. And I'm gonna cut kind of at an angle, something like this. Okay, going on the carrots and the cauliflower, we're gonna start with 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Then I'm gonna do garlic powder, smoked paprika, dried oregano, red pepper flakes if you want, kosher salt, and black pepper. I did a teaspoon of everything other than the black pepper, but I think I'm gonna need a little bit more because this is just like a lot to coat. I think I'm gonna add another teaspoon of each thing just because there's so much in here and we really want it to be spiced. Okay, let's see how that is. Yeah, much better. Okay, everything is nice and coated. Let's get this onto the sheet pan and into the oven. All right, into the oven at 400, and also cooking the rice now. Okay, now we're gonna make the tahini sauce. I'm probably gonna put this as the first instruction when I actually write out the recipe, just so you have it out of the way, but I'm just doing it now. So first, let's just chop up the green onions. I'm gonna use 2, but I'm gonna chop them all up right now because we can use the extra for topping. Set this aside for later. And then I'm also gonna chop up all of the cilantro. Probably won't use it all, but same thing, I'll use the extra for topping. And you really just want the leaves for this, not the stems, but if you get some of the stems, that's fine. Okay, and then the last thing is we just need to peel 1 garlic clove. And gonna cut the lemon in half. Okay, we're ready to start blending. So we're just gonna add all of the ingredients right to the food processor. First, 1/4 cup of tahini, 2 tablespoons of olive oil, juice of half of a lemon, our 2 green onions, about 2/3 cup of chopped cilantro, garlic clove, a half teaspoon of salt, and a half teaspoon of black pepper. Okay, so it got somewhat smooth, but definitely needs a little bit of water. I'm gonna start with 2 tablespoons of warm water. I think I'm just gonna add 1 more tablespoon of water. I want it to be a little bit thinner. Yeah, this is nice and thin, but it's still saucy and it has a little bit of texture to it, which I like when I'm adding herbs. Okay, so it's been about 20 minutes now that the cauliflower and the carrots have been roasting. So I just removed this from the oven. Then I'm just kind of tossing everything. Just continue to kind of like coat in the spices and mix up where they're placed on the pan. And now I'm gonna add the lentils. Just spreading everything out. We want it to be in kind of like one single layer as much as possible. And you should be able to because the carrots and the cauliflower will have shrunk in size at this point. Okay, I've got this pretty evenly spread out and now I am tossing it back in the oven. The goal of putting it back in is to get these lentils to get just a little bit crispy. Okay, my rice just finished cooking and I'm gonna add in just the remaining kale that we have. This was about 3 cups. I wanna add it in now because it's gonna steam with the hot rice. And I'm gonna salt it a little too. I'm just gonna let that sit off the heat covered. Okay, our cauliflower carrot lentil mix is ready. That was another 18 minutes or so, just so the lentils could crisp up and the cauliflower could finish getting nice and browned. Okay, let's plate our bowls. Time for the best part always. We're gonna do a taste test and I just love the look of these bowls. I've never really made anything like this before. I'm glad that I finally did because it's so colorful and the sauce I think is gonna make it once again. So let's give it a try. Oh wow, there's so many different flavors working here. I need one more bite. I love the different textures. The lentils did get just like a little bit crisp. The veggies are crisp. Then we have that creamy tahini sauce and the carrots kind of get sweet once they've been roasted for a little bit. So we have sweetness there. There's the fluffy rice with little pieces of kale in it. There are just so many different textures in this bowl and I think that's what makes a really great grain bowl. So many different components, tastes, textures in like every single bite. And I think I really did that with this one. Okay, so that was the last recipe from this week. I really can't believe it. I have really enjoyed every night's recipe, even the plant-based ones. Like I know sometimes I get people who are kind of hesitant about doing the plant-based meals, but I really encourage you to try them because those ones have been so good. I loved the lentil wraps from the other day. The soup was like such a perfect kickoff to soup season. I always love a one-pot chicken and rice, so I loved that one. And then the pesto meatballs, even just the meatballs alone is perfect for like a very quick meal prep, ingredient prep, or the whole meal as a weeknight dinner. So I think all of these in their own way are just like really great weeknight recipes when you don't have a lot of time, but you want to eat something that's really nourishing and still tasty and exciting. And I just love how this series kind of makes me go out of my comfort zone every time because I put together dishes that I just wouldn't normally think of because I have to figure out ways to make all of the ingredients work, to use everything up, to not spend a lot of money, and to deliver a lot of flavor even when you're limited by how many different ingredients you can use, which is really difficult a lot of the time. So I hope you cook along with me. And the recipe for today and the recipes from this week are all on my website, fully written out so that you don't have to just like follow along with what I'm doing in the video. You can actually pull it up. Check that out. Make sure you subscribe to my channel. I'm gonna be doing more things like this. I have a lot of exciting videos coming up. And then make sure you subscribe to my Substack newsletter as well. I am sending out one of my free newsletters this Sunday that includes a full roundup of the grocery list, the pantry staples I use, all of the recipes, everything that you need to follow this series in one spot. And it's really convenient because it can be kind of hard to go back and find different ones when I've done this so many times now. So subscribe there, you'll get it sent right to your email inbox, and follow me on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Pinterest, anywhere that you can pretty much find me. Jen Eats Good with 2 N's and 3 O's. Thank you again for watching this week. I had so much fun with it. I hope you loved the videos. Let me know your feedback, and I'm so excited to hear what you think of the recipes. Okay, I'm gonna go finish this. Thank you so much for watching. See you guys soon.